In a city known for its grandeur and learning, amid the roar of horse-drawn carriages and the echo of cathedral bells, stood one of the largest hospitals in the world, a place meant to be a sanctuary of healing. But inside its stone corridors and linen-draped wards, something mysterious was at work. Women arrived in hope, and sometimes never left alive. Doctors, respected and trained in the highest traditions, followed every known rule. Yet death still stalked the patients they examined. And the most disturbing truth was this: the very people meant to heal might unknowingly be the very instruments of harm. No one taught this in any medical lecture hall. No book contained the answer. Yet the numbers cold, unyielding, relentless told a story nobody wanted to hear. And it was about to explode across the heart of European medicine. This is not merely a tale of old hospital walls and fading uniforms. It is a story of human lives, of hope and devastation, and of a truth so simple it was dismissed as impossible. At stake was the very nature of healing itself. The revelation hidden in this story did not just change one hospital, but would ultimately reshape the way the world understood illness, care, and the responsibilities of those entrusted with human life. By the end of this narrative, you will understand how one overlooked insight saved countless lives, and how resistance to that insight nearly buried it forever. It was the mid-19th century, a time when the streets were crowded with carriages and pedestrians, when public health systems were in their infancy, and when the very notion of microscopic life was unknown. In this era, Vienna stood as a beacon of learning, its great universities and hospitals, drawing minds from across Europe. Yet, within the grand hospital known simply as the General Hospital, something dark and inexplicable was happening. Here, two maternity wards existed side by side. One was staffed by experienced midwives, the other by well-educated doctors and students. To all appearances, they were identical. The same building, similar patients, the same hopes for healthy births. But the results could not have been more different. In the ward tended by midwives, the women fared relatively well. Their chances of surviving childbirth hovered at what passed for normal. But in the doctor's ward, the outcome was grim tragically and disturbingly so. Mortality rates there soared to 3 times higher than in the midwife's wing, leaving a chilling pattern that defied explanation. No one at the time understood why the fate of mothers differed so drastically inside the same hospital, let alone why doctors' wards seemed to carry a curse while others did not. This discrepancy was not just statistical noise, it was a haunting signal that something fundamental was terribly wrong. Yet the prevailing medical beliefs of the time, rooted in theories of bad air, miasma, and imbalance, offered no explanation. There was no concept of invisible agents traveling unseen from person to person. The idea that the practitioners themselves might be part of the problem was almost unthinkable. Doctors were caretakers of life, not conveyors of harm, and yet the evidence was mounting. Step into the maternity wards during those years. The echoes of crying infants, the whispered prayers of anxious families, the frenetic urgency of medical staff. Yet beneath the surface of everyday life in the hospital, an invisible thread tied life and death together in a haunting pattern. Here, new mothers would walk into a ward full of promise, and days later, some would lie motionless, their lives stolen by an unseen adversary. No one could explain this invisible menace. No lecture in any medical school addressed it. No contemporary book described its cause. Doctors and students had their own routine. They would spend their mornings in classrooms and dissection halls, learning the intricacies of anatomy through direct observation of the human body. Autopsies were part of medical education, a rite of passage. Yet, unknown to these practitioners, their hands and tools carried with them fragments of what lay beneath the sheet, unseen remnants of life and death. Then they would march down the hospital corridors, straight into the maternity ward, to examine women in labor. There were no protocols for cleansing between duties, no understanding that one task could contaminate the other. And so, what belonged in the realm of study and death was brought directly into the realm of life and birth. Day after day, week after week, these unseen remnants accompanied them, and mothers began falling ill. Hospital records, cold and unyielding, told a story that doctors could not yet interpret. Yet, it was not just numbers, it was grief, loss, and disbelief. And worse, it was happening in the very place entrusted with care. This was no ordinary tragedy, it was a systemic failure with a source hidden in plain sight. Amid the ritual of births and deaths, one young physician began to notice patterns, subtle, unsettling connections others overlooked. He saw that the crisis was concentrated in the doctor's ward, and that the deaths seemed linked not to any peculiar strain of illness outside the hospital, but to something happening within its walls. He traced the movements of practitioners, their steps from autopsy room to delivery room, and a chilling hypothesis began to form. Could it be that the very hands with which doctors and students sought to heal were carrying something dangerous? A notion so unsettling that many of his peers refused even to consider it. To suggest that those sworn to heal might unwittingly cause harm was unthinkable. And yet the question gnawed at him. Could the deadly pattern be linked to something as simple and as terrifying as touch? Would you, in an age devoid of microscopic science, dare to question the established wisdom of your era? To posit that something invisible, carried from one task to another, was spreading misery? He persisted. He asked what most would not, and in doing so, he placed himself on a collision course with tradition and with the wrath of the medical establishment itself. The physician did not arrive at his conclusion all at once. It came slowly, through observation, through careful comparison, and through a tragedy that forced the truth into the open. A respected colleague, a man who spent his days examining the dead, suffered an accidental injury during an autopsy. What followed shocked everyone. His condition deteriorated rapidly, displaying the same sequence of symptoms seen in the women who had died in the maternity ward. For the first time, the physicians saw the pattern clearly. What afflicted the mothers was not unique to childbirth. It was something introduced into the body, something carried unknowingly from one setting to another. Something invisible, but devastatingly real. The implication was staggering. It suggested that doctors and students, moving directly from postmortem examinations to the care of living patients, were transferring unseen material from the dead to the living, not out of cruelty, not out of negligence, but out of ignorance shared by the entire medical world of the time. Acting on this insight, the physician proposed a simple intervention. Before entering the maternity ward, practitioners were required to cleanse their hands using a strong solution known for removing organic residue. No elaborate equipment, no advanced instruments, just a deliberate pause, and a cleansing ritual that, at the time, had no scientific explanation. The results were immediate. The numbers that had haunted the hospital for years began to collapse. Mortality rates, once terrifyingly high, dropped dramatically within months. The wards that had been places of quiet despair began to resemble what they were always meant to be, spaces of life and recovery. And yet, instead of celebration, the response was resistance. The idea that doctors themselves had been responsible, even unintentionally, was too painful to accept. To acknowledge it would mean admitting that countless deaths might have been prevented. It challenged pride, hierarchy, and the very identity of medicine as it then existed. The evidence was there. but the medical establishment turned away. The truth had been revealed, but it was not yet welcomed. The physician's insistence did not earn him praise. It earned him isolation. His findings were questioned, dismissed, and in some circles, ridiculed. There was no accepted framework to explain why his method worked, and without explanation, the medical world hesitated to listen. Gradually, his influence faded from the institutions he sought to reform. The hospital returned to old habits, and the tragedy resumed. It would take years and further losses before science caught up with what observation had already revealed. Only later, when the invisible world of microorganisms was finally acknowledged, did medicine fully understand the significance of what had been ignored. What was once rejected became foundational. Hospitals around the world began to introduce structured hygiene practices. Medical education slowly shifted. Protocols emerged not just as customs, but as safeguards. The legacy of this story is not one of instant triumph, but of delayed recognition. It is a reminder that medicine, for all its advances, is shaped by human judgment and human resistance to uncomfortable truths. Lives were saved, but only after lives had been lost. Today, hospitals are defined by routines that feel ordinary: clean hands, sterile environments, careful transitions between spaces. These practices are so deeply ingrained that it is difficult to imagine a time when they did not exist. Yet, they are not ancient wisdom. They are hard-earned lessons written in the silent records of history. Every modern hospital corridor carries the echo of this untold story. Every pause before entering a ward, every moment of preparation, is a quiet acknowledgement of a truth once denied. The invisible dangers that haunted 19th century medicine did not disappear, but our understanding of them changed. And with that understanding came responsibility. This story endures because it reminds us that progress is not automatic. It must be recognized, accepted, and acted upon even when it challenges authority. History often remembers breakthroughs as moments of triumph. But behind every advance lies a shadow, a period of confusion, resistance, and loss. This untold medical story is not about blame. It is about humility, about the danger of certainty in an uncertain world. Medicine moves forward not only through discovery, but through the courage to question what is already believed. And sometimes, the greatest obstacle to saving lives is not lack of knowledge, but the refusal to see what is already there. Progress in medicine often begins with a mistake, but the cost is always human life. If you value serious, well-researched stories that reveal the hidden truths behind medical history, subscribe to Untold Medical Stories. Here, we explore the moments medicine rarely talks about, the lessons learned the hard way, and the stories that continue to shape care today.